Sometimes 30 seconds of kindness can change 3 lives forever. Sometimes those 30 seconds can expose billion-dollar crimes and save a dying boy. And sometimes they can turn a broke black waitress into the most dangerous person a killer has ever met. This is one of those times. But before I tell you about the moment that left a billionaire CEO speechless, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your city. I want to know where my incredible viewers are watching from, and stick around until the end to rate this story from 1 to 10. Trust me, you're going to need that scale. Now, let's go back to the beginning, to the night when Danny Carter thought her world was ending. Marcus was dying in silence, not literally, but watching her 18-year-old brother shrink into himself day after day, knowing she was failing him. That was killing Danny Carter from the inside out. "Danny, please," Marcus had signed that morning, tears streaming down his face. "I heard about a job at the warehouse. I can drop out, help pay—" "No." She'd grabbed his hands, stopping the conversation cold. "You graduate. You get that surgery. I don't care what I have to do." But standing in Murphy's diner bathroom 6 hours later, staring at her phone screen, Danny felt the weight of that promise crushing her chest. Her bank account balance stared back at her like a death sentence, $3,253. She needed $47,600 by December 15th, 28 days. The experimental hearing program had a waiting list 300 people long, and if she missed this payment deadline, Marcus would go to the back of the line. At 18, this might be his last shot at hearing his own voice. The notification sound made her sick. Another overdraft warning. Outside, Atlanta's autumn rain hammered the windows like angry fists, the kind of storm that kept customers away and tips small, the kind of night that made everything feel impossible. Danny splashed cold water on her face and straightened her uniform. Third double shift this week. Her manager Jake had practically begged her to stay when the evening waitress called in sick. Again. Not that Danny had much choice. Every extra hour meant maybe, just maybe, getting closer to that impossible number dancing in her head. She pushed through the bathroom door and nearly collided with her co-worker Sharon, who was fumbling with her purse and car keys. "Girl, I am so sorry," Sharon said, not looking sorry at all. "My babysitter cancelled and Tommy's got that ear infection and—" "It's fine," Danny cut her off. She'd heard this song before. Sharon lived in a world where other people cleaned up her messes. Must be nice. "You're a lifesaver, Danny. I owe you big time." Sharon rushed out into the storm, leaving Danny alone with Jake, who was already counting register receipts with the desperation of a man behind on rent. "Thank God you're staying," he muttered. "Friday night in this weather? We'll be lucky to break even." Danny tied her apron and surveyed the half-empty diner. A trucker nursed coffee in booth 3. 2 college students shared fries by the window. An elderly woman picked at pie near the counter. Nothing that screamed big tips. But then the bell above the door chimed and everything changed. The man who walked in didn't belong in Murphy's diner. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Danny made in 6 months. Italian leather shoes that had never seen a puddle stepped carefully across the worn linoleum. He shook rain from a coat that looked like it came straight from a movie. What struck Danny most wasn't his obvious wealth. It was his eyes. Cold. Calculating. The kind of eyes that saw everything and trusted nothing. He scanned the room like he was memorizing exits, then chose the corner booth, the one with the best view of the entire restaurant, the one where someone could watch without being watched. "You take Mr. Moneybags," Jake whispered. "Maybe he tips better than he dresses." Danny grabbed a menu and walked over, putting on her customer service smile. The one that said, "I'm happy to serve you," instead of, "I'm dying inside." "Good evening. Can I start you with something to drink?" The man looked up, and for just a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise? Recognition? It was gone too fast to tell. "Coffee, black." His voice carried the kind of authority that came from never being told no. "Coming right up." As she poured his coffee, Danny felt his eyes following her every move. Not in the creepy way she'd learned to handle after 3 years of waitressing. This was different, like he was studying her, taking notes. She brought the coffee over, steam rising between them in the diner's fluorescent glow. "Have you decided on food, or do you need a few more minutes?" "I'm waiting for someone." He checked an expensive watch. "Though I'm starting to think they won't show." There was something in his voice, disappointment mixed with resignation, like he'd been let down before. "Well, the coffee's fresh, and we've got the best apple pie in Atlanta if you change your mind." He almost smiled. Almost. Danny turned to check on her other tables when the door chimed again. The sound cut through the rain like a bell announcing fate itself. The second man who entered couldn't have been more different from the first. Where Mr. Expensive Suit radiated cold control, this newcomer seemed gentle, confused. His grey hair was damp from the rain, and he wore a simple brown jacket that had seen better years. But it was the way he moved that caught Danny's attention, hesitant, like someone navigating a world that wasn't built for them. Danny glanced back at the corner booth. The wealthy man had gone completely still, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. His face had transformed from cold indifference to something raw and complicated, recognition and pain. The older man approached the counter, and Danny watched the silent drama unfold. He tried to get Jake's attention, pointing at the menu board above the grill. Jake looked up from his receipts, annoyed. "Yeah, what do you want?" The man pointed again, more urgently this time. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His hands moved in small, frustrated gestures. Jake's annoyance grew. "Look, buddy, I don't have all night. Either order something or move along. We've got paying customers." From the corner booth, she heard the sharp intake of breath. The wealthy man's knuckles were white around his coffee cup. That's when it hit Danny like lightning. The careful way the older man moved, the frustrated gestures, the look of someone who had something important to say but no way to say it. He was deaf, and the man in the corner booth knew him. "He can't hear you." Danny's words cut through the diner's tension like a blade. Every head turned toward her, including the man in the expensive suit, whose mask of control had completely cracked. The deaf man's eyes met hers across the counter, and she saw something that made her chest ache. Hope mixed with exhaustion, the look of someone who'd been fighting to be understood his entire life. The same look she saw in Marcus's eyes every day. Without thinking, Danny stepped forward and raised her hands. "What would you like to eat?" She signed, her fingers forming the familiar shapes she'd learned for her brother. The transformation was instant. The man's face lit up, like Christmas morning, years of weariness melting away. "You know sign language? My brother is deaf. What sounds good tonight?" Around them, the diner had gone completely silent. Even the trucker had stopped stirring his coffee. But Danny was focused entirely on the man in front of her, giving him something the world rarely offered, her complete attention. "I haven't had a good burger in years," he signed back, his movements elegant and practiced. "The kind my mother used to make. We can do that. How do you want it cooked? Medium with everything. And coffee, if it's not too much trouble." "One burger, medium. Everything on it," Danny called to Jake, whose mouth was hanging open. "And another coffee." As she poured the coffee, the deaf man caught her attention again. "Thank you. Most people just give up." The words hit Danny harder than she expected. She thought about Marcus, about all the times the world had failed him, about all the times she'd wanted to give up but couldn't. "Everyone deserves to be heard," she signed back. That's when she felt eyes burning into her back. She turned to find the man in the expensive suit, leaning forward, his cold mask completely gone. He was staring at her like she'd just performed a miracle, or like she'd just changed everything. The rain kept falling against the windows, but inside Murphy's diner, something had shifted. Three strangers, three different worlds had collided in a way that would change all their lives forever. Danny thought this was just another shift, another desperate attempt to scrape together money for Marcus's surgery. She had no idea she'd just walked into the middle of a family war worth billions of dollars. She had no idea that 30 seconds of kindness would make her the most dangerous person a killer had ever met. And she definitely had no idea that the man watching her from the corner booth was about to turn her world completely upside down. Word count, 650 words outside, Atlanta's autumn rain hammered the windows like angry fists, the kind of storm that kept customers away and tips small, the kind of night that made everything feel impossible. Danny splashed cold water on her face and straightened her uniform. Third double shift this week. Her manager, Jake, had practically begged her to stay when the evening waitress called in sick. Again. Not that Danny had much choice. Every extra hour meant maybe, just maybe, getting closer to that impossible number dancing in her head. $47,600. The exact cost of Marcus hearing his first words at 18 years old. She pushed through the bathroom door and nearly collided with her co-worker Sharon, who was fumbling with her purse and car keys. "Girl, I am so sorry," Sharon said, not looking sorry at all. "My babysitter cancelled and Tommy's got that ear infection and—" "It's fine," Danny cut her off. She'd heard this song before. Sharon lived in a world where other people cleaned up her messes. Must be nice. "You're a lifesaver, Danny. I owe you big time." Sharon rushed out into the storm, leaving Danny alone with Jake, who was already counting register receipts with the desperation of a man behind on rent. "Thank God you're staying," he muttered. "Friday night in this weather? We'll be lucky to break even." Danny tied her apron and surveyed the half-empty diner. A trucker nursed coffee in booth 3. 2 college students shared fries by the window. An elderly woman picked at pie near the counter. Nothing that screamed big tips. But then the bell above the door chimed and everything changed. The man who walked in didn't belong in Murphy's diner. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Danny made in 6 months. Italian leather shoes that had never seen a puddle stepped carefully across the worn linoleum. He shook rain from a coat that looked like it came straight from a movie. What struck Danny most wasn't his obvious wealth. It was his eyes. Cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that saw everything and trusted nothing. He scanned the room like he was memorizing exits, then chose the corner booth, the one with the best view of the entire restaurant, the one where someone could watch without being watched. "You take Mr. Moneybags," Jake whispered. "Maybe he tips better than he dresses." Danny grabbed a menu and walked over, putting on her customer service smile. The one that said, "I'm happy to serve you," instead of, "I'm dying inside." "Good evening, can I start you with something to drink?" The man looked up, and for just a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise? Recognition? It was gone too fast to tell. "Coffee. Black." His voice carried the kind of authority that came from never being told no. "Coming right up." As she poured his coffee, Danny felt his eyes following her every move. Not in the creepy way she'd learned to handle after 3 years of waitressing. This was different, like he was studying her, taking notes. She brought the coffee over, steam rising between them in the diner's fluorescent glow. "Have you decided on food, or do you need a few more minutes?" "I'm waiting for someone." He checked an expensive watch. "Though I'm starting to think they won't show." There was something in his voice, disappointment mixed with resignation, like he'd been let down before. "Well, the coffee's fresh, and we've got the best apple pie in Atlanta if you change your mind." He almost smiled. Almost. That's when the door chimed again. The second man who entered couldn't have been more different from the first. Where Mr. Expensive Suit radiated cold control, this newcomer seemed gentle, confused. His grey hair was damp from the rain, and he wore a simple brown jacket that had seen better years. But it was the way he moved that caught Danny's attention, hesitant, like someone navigating a world that wasn't built for them. The older man approached the counter, and Danny watched as recognition dawned on the suit's face. His jaw tightened, his hands formed fists. Family drama. Great. Just what her night needed. The older man tried to get Jake's attention, pointing at the menu board above the grill. Jake looked up from his receipts, annoyed. "Yeah, what do you want?" The man pointed again, more urgently this time. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. That's when it hit Danny. The careful way he moved, the frustrated gestures, the look of someone who had something important to say, but no way to say it. He was deaf. Jake's annoyance grew. "Look, buddy, I don't have all night. Either order something or—" "He can't hear you." Danny's words cut through the diner's ambient noise. Every head turned toward her, including the man in the expensive suit, whose coffee cup had frozen halfway to his lips. The deaf man's eyes met hers, and she saw something that made her chest ache. Hope mixed with exhaustion. The look of someone who'd been fighting to be understood his entire life. Without thinking, Danny stepped forward and raised her hands. "What would you like to eat?" She signed, her fingers forming the familiar shape she'd learned from Marcus. The man's face lit up like Christmas morning. "You know sign language? My brother is deaf. What sounds good tonight?" Around them, the diner had gone completely silent. Even the trucker had stopped stirring his coffee. "I haven't had a good burger in years," the man signed back. "The kind my mother used to make. We can do that. How do you want it cooked?" "Medium with everything. And coffee if it's not too much trouble." "One burger, medium, everything on it," Danny called to Jake, whose mouth was hanging open. "And another coffee." As she poured the coffee, the deaf man caught her attention again. "Thank you. Most people just give up." "Everyone deserves to be heard," she signed back. That's when she felt eyes on her back. The man in the expensive suit was leaning forward, his cold mask completely gone. He was staring at her like she'd just performed a miracle, or like she'd just ruined everything. The rain kept falling against the windows, but inside Murphy's diner, something had shifted. 3 strangers, 3 different worlds, had collided in a way that would change all their lives forever. She thought this was just another shift, another step closer to saving Marcus. She had no idea she'd just walked into the middle of a family war worth billions of dollars. The silence that followed felt like the entire world holding its breath. Danny had seen this look before, the way people stared when Marcus signed in public. Half fascination, half discomfort, like witnessing something beautiful and foreign at the same time. But the older man's gratitude was infectious. As she set his coffee down, he caught her hand gently and signed, "You have no idea what this means to me." "I think I do," she replied, glancing toward the corner booth where the wealthy stranger sat frozen. The deaf man followed her gaze, and his face changed completely. The joy drained away, replaced by something complicated, recognition mixed with old hurt. "Thomas," came a voice from behind them. Everyone turned. The man in the expensive suit had stood up, his coffee forgotten. His voice cracked slightly on the single word, like he hadn't said it in years. The older man, Thomas, turned slowly. When their eyes met, the temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Thomas's hands moved in sharp, angry gestures. Even without knowing every sign, Danny could read the emotion, betrayal, disappointment, years of accumulated pain. The wealthy man stepped closer, his composure cracking with each step. "Thomas, please. We need to talk." More signing from Thomas. Faster now, his face flushed with emotion. "What's he saying?" Jake whispered. But Danny was too focused to answer. She watched Thomas's hands tell a story of abandonment, of promises broken, of family that chose money over people. "You never came," she caught. 5 years of nothing. The wealthy man. She was starting to understand he wasn't just wealthy, he was someone important. Ran his hands through his hair. I know I failed you. But I'm here now." Thomas shook his head and turned back to Danny, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "Can I get that burger to go?" he signed. "I don't think I can stay." Before Danny could respond, the wealthy man moved closer. "Thomas, wait. Please. Just 5 minutes." The older man's hands flew in response, and this time Danny caught every word. 5 minutes? I waited 5 years for you to remember I existed. 5 years since Sarah's funeral, and you never once. Don't. The wealthy man's voice turned sharp. Don't bring her into this. She was my niece too, Richard. I loved her too. Richard. So that was his name. And Sarah. Someone they'd both lost. Danny felt like she was witnessing something too private, too raw. But she couldn't look away. Thomas's pain was her brother's pain. The frustration of being unheard, misunderstood, pushed aside. I was grieving, Richard said quietly. And I wasn't? Thomas's signs were fierce now. I lost my family twice. First Sarah, then you. The burger was ready, but Jake seemed as mesmerized by the drama as everyone else. The entire diner had become an audience to this family breakdown. Richard sat down heavily at Thomas's table, uninvited. "I'm trying to make things right. 5 years too late." "Maybe, but I saw what she did." Richard nodded toward Danny. "The way she helped you. The way she saw you. Really saw you." Thomas glanced at Danny, then back at his nephew. So I remembered something. About who we used to be. About what you always told me mattered most." "Which was?" Richard's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "How we treat people when they can't do anything for us." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Thomas studied Richard's face, searching for sincerity. "Most people walk past others in need every single day. You think you'd notice the signs? Subscribe now, because tomorrow someone you love might need a stranger's kindness. If you're not ready to subscribe, comment below. What's stopping you from staying informed?" Thomas finally sat down across from Richard. The anger was still there, but underneath it, Danny could see hope trying to break through. "Talk," he signed simply. As the two men leaned toward each other, speaking in whispers and careful signs, Danny felt a strange mixture of emotions. She'd somehow become the bridge between them. Her simple act of kindness had opened a door that had been closed for years. But something nagged at her. The way Richard kept glancing at her, like he was still studying, still taking notes. "That was beautiful, girl," Jake said, finally bringing Thomas his burger. "Didn't know you could do all that hand-talking." "My brother," Danny said simply, but her eyes stayed on the two men in the corner. Richard was showing Thomas something on his phone, pictures maybe. Thomas's expression softened slightly with each swipe. Then Richard looked up and caught Danny watching. For a moment, their eyes locked across the diner. His expression was unreadable but intense, like he was making a decision about her. The bell chimed again as another customer entered, breaking the spell. Danny turned back to her work, but she could feel Richard's eyes following her movements. 20 minutes later, as Thomas finished his meal, Richard walked over to the counter where Danny was refilling sugar dispensers. "Excuse me," he said formally. "I wanted to thank you for what you did for my uncle." Uncle, so Thomas was family. Important family, judging by Richard's expensive everything. "Just doing my job," Danny said, though they both knew it was more than that. Not everyone would have bothered. She looked at him directly. Everyone deserves to be heard. Something shifted in Richard's expression, like she'd just passed some kind of test. "What's your name?" "Danny. Danny." He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. "Thank you, Danny." He started to walk away, then turned back. "How long have you been signing?" "Since I was 10. My little brother was born deaf." Richard nodded slowly. "You're very good at it. Natural." There was something in his tone that made her nervous, like he was filing away information for later use. Thomas appeared beside Richard, looking exhausted but somehow lighter. He signed something to his nephew, who nodded. "Thank you." Thomas signed to Danny one final time. "You gave me back my family tonight." As they prepared to leave, Richard pulled out his wallet. He left a $100 bill on the counter. "For the coffee," he said, "and the kindness." Then they were gone, disappearing into the storm like they'd never been there at all, except for the $100 bill, and the feeling that Danny's life had just taken a turn she couldn't yet understand. Jake whistled low. $100 for coffee and a burger. Girl, what did you do to that man? Danny stared at the money, then at the door where they'd vanished. She had no idea. But something told her she was about to find out. 3 days passed before Danny understood what kind of storm she'd walked into. She was restocking napkin holders when her phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made her drop the entire stack. Lawson Tech CEO Richard Lawson announces major accessibility initiative. Her hands shook as she clicked the article. There he was, Richard from the diner, standing behind a podium with the confidence of someone who owned the world, which, apparently, he kind of did. Billionaire CEO Richard Lawson unveiled plans yesterday for a $50 million accessibility program citing a recent reminder of the power of human connection as his inspiration. $50 million. The man who'd left her $100 tip was worth more than some small countries. "Holy crap," she whispered, scrolling through photos of Richard in boardrooms, at galas, shaking hands with politicians. This wasn't just rich. This was obscenely, impossibly rich. The article mentioned his uncle Thomas Lawson, described as a founding investor who left the company in 2018 following philosophical differences with leadership. Philosophical differences. That was corporate speak for the family blowout she'd witnessed. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Ms. Carter, this is Jennifer from Lawson Tech. Mr. Lawson would like to discuss a catering opportunity with you. Are you available this afternoon?" Danny's mouth went dry. What kind of catering?" "A private event. The pay would be quite generous. Could you meet at our downtown office at 2 p.m.? After she hung up, Danny stared at her reflection in the diner's window. 3 days ago, she was nobody. A waitress drowning in bills and impossible dreams. Now a billionaire wanted to hire her. The Lawson Tech building rose 40 stories above downtown Atlanta, all glass and steel and intimidation. Danny felt like an imposter, walking through the marble lobby in her best dress, which was really just her least stained work outfit. Jennifer turned out to be a crisp woman in her 30s who looked like she ate nails for breakfast. "Mr. Lawson is on a call, but he'll be with you shortly," she said, leading Danny to a waiting area that probably cost more than her apartment. 20 minutes later, Richard emerged from an elevator, looking every inch the billionaire CEO. The storm-soaked man from the diner was gone, replaced by someone who radiated power and control. "Danny, thank you for coming." His office occupied half the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city. It was the kind of space designed to make visitors feel small. "I'll get straight to the point," Richard said, settling behind a desk the size of a small car. "I'm hosting a charity gala next week. 500 guests, including some very important people. I'd like you to handle the catering." Danny blinked. "Mr. Lawson, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not a caterer. I'm a waitress." "I know exactly what you are." His tone was neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "The event pays $20,000, plus tips." The number hit her like a physical blow. $20,000. Nearly half of what she needed for Marcus's surgery. That's very generous, but there's more." Richard leaned forward. "I want you to work the event personally. Mingle with guests. Be yourself. The same person you were 3 nights ago." Alarm bells started ringing in Danny's head. "I don't understand." "Some of my guests will have accessibility needs. I want someone there who can help them feel seen." The way he said it, like he was testing the word, made her skin crawl. This felt less like a job offer and more like she was being auditioned for something she didn't understand. "Mr. Lawson, what's this really about?" For a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw something raw underneath. Grief. Loneliness. The same look Thomas had worn in the diner. "My Uncle Thomas will be there. It'll be the first family event he's attended in 5 years. He paused, searching for words. "I want him to see that things can be different. That I can be different." "You want me to perform being kind?" Richard's jaw tightened. "I want you to be who you are. The person who saw my uncle as human instead of an inconvenience." There it was. The test. He wanted to see if her kindness was real or just an act. "And if I say no?" "Then you go back to your life and I go back to mine." He stood up, walking to the window. "But your brother Marcus loses his chance at that surgery." Danny's blood turned to ice. "How do you know about Marcus?" Richard didn't turn around. "I know a lot of things, Danny. I know you've been working 3 jobs. I know you're $44,000 short on his medical bills. I know the deadline is December 15th. You investigated me." "I had you researched, yes." He finally turned to face her. "I needed to know if you were genuine or just another person trying to take advantage of my family's situation. And?" "I'm still deciding." The words hung between them like a threat. Danny felt trapped, manipulated, but $20,000. "There's someone else you should meet." Richard said, pressing a button on his desk. "She's been very interested in you." The door opened, and a woman walked in who made Jennifer look warm and fuzzy. Tall, sharp-featured, with eyes like winter, she wore power like armor. "Danny, this is my cousin, Victoria Lawson, our Chief Operating Officer." Victoria's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "The famous Waitress. Richard's told me so much about you." "Victoria handles our background checks," Richard said. "She's been looking into your qualifications." The way Victoria studied her made Danny feel like a bug under a microscope. Fascinating story, really. Single woman, raising a disabled brother, drowning in debt. Very convenient timing, wouldn't you say? "Victoria," Richard warned. "Oh, I'm not suggesting anything improper." Victoria's voice dripped honey over razor wire. "I'm just wondering what the odds are that someone with your particular skill set would happen to be working at that exact diner on that exact night." Danny's temper flared. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Should I be?" "Victoria." Richard's voice turned sharp. "That's enough." But Victoria wasn't done. "I'm just saying, Richard, that people in desperate situations sometimes make desperate choices. And desperate people can be very good actors." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Danny could see Richard weighing Victoria's words, doubt creeping into his expression. "You know what?" Danny stood up. "Keep your money. I don't need to prove myself to either of you." She was halfway to the door when Richard called out, "30,000. Danny stopped, her hand on the doorknob. $30,000, plus expenses, plus guaranteed payment for your brother's surgery if you complete the job successfully. Marcus's face flashed through her mind, his tears that morning when he'd offered to quit school. She turned around slowly. What exactly would completing the job successfully require? Richard glanced at Victoria, who was watching the exchange with predatory interest. Just be yourself, Danny. Help people who need it. Show my guests, show Thomas, that genuine kindness still exists. And if I fail your test? Then you go home empty-handed. And Marcus? He shrugged. Well, I'm sure other opportunities will come along. It was a threat wrapped in silk, but it was still a threat. Victoria's satisfied smirk confirmed it. Danny thought about Marcus signing that he wanted to quit school, about the surgery waiting list, about running out of time. Fine, she said, but I want the surgery payment in writing, and I want it deposited in advance. Half now, half after, Victoria said smoothly. Standard contract terms. Deal. As Danny signed the papers Victoria produced, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was signing her life away. But Marcus needed that surgery, and she was out of options. Excellent, Richard said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. The gala is Saturday night. Jennifer will send you the details. As Danny left the building, she felt Victoria's eyes burning into her back. Something about the woman's satisfaction made her nervous. She'd just agreed to perform kindness for billionaires, who saw her as either a saint or a con artist. She was about to enter a world where her every move would be scrutinized, judged, potentially used against her. But Victoria had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed that because Danny was desperate, she was also weak. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The check arrived on Thursday morning, hand-delivered to Murphy's Diner in an envelope thick enough to stop a bullet. $15,000. Half of Marcus's surgery sitting in her trembling hands. Danny stared at the numbers until they blurred. She'd never seen this much money at once. Hell, she'd never imagined having this much money. Girl, you look like you've seen a ghost, Jake said, refilling her coffee cup. Good news or bad news? I honestly don't know yet. That was the truth. The money was real. She'd deposited it immediately and watched her account balance transform from pathetic to almost hopeful. But the strings attached felt like chains. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Gala details attached. Saturday 7 p.m. Dress code formal. A car will pick you up at 5:30. Don't disappoint us. V. Victoria. Even her texts felt like threats. The attached document was 20 pages long. Guest list, menu requirements, accessibility accommodations, and a section titled behavioral expectations that made Danny's skin crawl. Expected to maintain professional demeanor at all times. Interactions with guests should be authentic but appropriate. Any behavior deemed unsuitable may result in immediate termination of contract. They were treating her like a performing seal. But at the bottom of the document was a single line that made it all worth it. Upon successful completion, remaining balance of $32,600 will be transferred within 24 hours. $32,600. Marcus's entire surgery, plus enough left over to keep them afloat while he recovered. The front door chimed, interrupting her thoughts. An elderly black woman entered, moving slowly with the help of a walker. She looked around the diner with the lost expression Danny recognized immediately. "Can I help you, Mom?" Danny asked, approaching gently. "I'm looking for my grandson," the woman said, her voice shaky. "He was supposed to pick me up from the doctor, but—" She fumbled with an old flip phone. "I can't figure out how to call him." Danny's heart clenched. The woman reminded her of Mrs. Patterson from her old neighborhood, who'd raised 5 grandchildren after her daughter died. "What's his name? Maybe I can help you reach him." 20 minutes later, Danny had called the grandson, who'd been frantically searching for his grandmother after a miscommunication about pickup locations, ordered her a cup of tea and slice of pie on the house, and sat with her until he arrived. "You're an angel," the woman said, patting Danny's hand as her grandson helped her to his car. Not many people would take time for an old lady these days. As they drove away, Danny felt the familiar warmth that came from helping someone who needed it. No cameras, no contracts, no audience, just basic human decency. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Richard. "Can we talk? It's important." They met at a coffee shop downtown, far from the corporate towers and power lunches. Richard looked different here, less intimidating, more human. He was staring into his coffee like it held answers to life's biggest questions. "Having second thoughts about Saturday?" Danny asked, sliding into the booth across from him. "Every day." He looked up, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "The woman at the diner this morning. My security team mentioned you helped someone find their family." Danny's blood chilled. "You're having me followed?" "I'm having you protected." Richard's voice was quiet, but firm. "There are people who wouldn't want this event to go well. People who have a lot to lose if I reconcile with Thomas. Victoria, among others." He leaned forward. "Danny, you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just a family dinner. Thomas controls 30% of Lawson Tech's original stock. If he comes back into the company, it shifts the balance of power. And Victoria loses influence. Victoria loses everything. She's built her career on being my closest advisor, my strategic mind. If Thomas returns..." Richard shrugged. "Let's just say she's not happy about recent developments." Danny felt like she was drowning in undercurrents she couldn't see. "Maybe I should back out. This is way more complicated than I signed up for." "You can't." The words came out sharper than Richard intended. He softened his tone. "I mean, Marcus needs that surgery. And He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I need to know if people like you still exist." "People like me?" "People who help elderly women find their families without expecting anything in return. People who see my uncle as a person instead of a problem." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "People who might help me remember what it feels like to be human." There it was again, the raw vulnerability he tried so hard to hide behind boardroom armor. "Richard, what happened to you?" He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I used to be different. Before the company got so big. Before Sarah died. I used to care about things besides profit margins and market share." He looked out the window at the bustling street. "Thomas used to say that our technology should connect people, not isolate them. I thought he was being naive. And now? Now I realize I'm the one who's been isolated. Surrounded by people who only tell me what I want to hear, who only see dollar signs when they look at me." He met her eyes. You're the first person in years who's talked to me like I'm just a person. Danny felt the weight of his loneliness, his desperate need to believe that genuine kindness still existed. But she also felt the trap tightening around her. What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not the person you think I am? Then I'll know the truth. Either way. Richard stood to leave. But Danny, for what it's worth, I don't think you can disappoint me. I think authenticity is hard-coded into who you are. As he walked away, Danny stared at her reflection in the coffee shop window. She was about to enter a world where her every gesture would be analyzed, where her natural compassion would be weaponized in a family war she barely understood. But Marcus needed that surgery. And maybe, just maybe, she could help a lonely billionaire remember what it meant to be human. She had no idea that Victoria was already 3 steps ahead, planning to destroy her before the night even began. Saturday night arrived like an execution date. Danny stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying to recognize herself. The dress had arrived that morning, elegant black silk that fit perfectly, along with shoes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She looked like someone who belonged in Richard's world, which was exactly the problem. "You're going to be amazing," Marcus signed from her doorway. He was grinning, more excited than she'd seen him in months. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Good. It means you care." He moved closer, his expression growing serious. "Danny, whatever happens tonight, you've already given me more hope than I've had in years. Just by trying." The car arrived exactly at 5:30. Not a taxi or rideshare, but a sleek black sedan with a driver who called her Ms. Carter like she was somebody important. The Lawson Tech building had been transformed. The lobby glittered with crystal and flowers, servers in crisp uniforms gliding between guests who looked like they'd stepped out of magazines. The combined net worth in this room could probably fund a small country. Danny felt like an imposter who'd wandered into the wrong movie. "Ms. Carter?" A server appeared at her elbow. "Mr. Lawson asked me to escort you to the reception area." The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt endless. When the doors opened, Danny stepped into a world that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Atlanta's skyline, while chandeliers cast warm light over guests who looked like they owned the world. And there was Richard, holding court near the bar. He'd traded his storm-soaked vulnerability for CEO armor, expensive tuxedo, confident smile, the kind of presence that made people lean in when he spoke. He caught sight of her and excused himself from his conversation. As he approached, Danny saw something flicker across his face. Surprise? Appreciation? She couldn't tell. "You look—" He paused, searching for words. "Like you belong here." It wasn't exactly the compliment she'd expected. "Thank you, I think. Come on, there are people I want you to meet." The next hour passed in a blur of handshakes and small talk. Richard introduced her to politicians, tech executives, charity leaders, all of them polite but clearly puzzled about why a waitress was mingling at their level. Danny was getting her bearings when she spotted him across the room. Thomas stood near the windows, looking lost and overwhelmed. He was dressed formally, but seemed uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Without thinking, Danny excused herself from a conversation about cryptocurrency and made her way over. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" she signed. Thomas's face lit up when he saw her. "You have no idea. I'd forgotten how exhausting these events can be. Want some company?" "I'd love some." They found a quieter corner where Thomas seemed to relax. He told her about his years away from the company, his work with deaf advocacy groups, his small apartment where he could actually hear himself think. "Richard's trying," he signed. "I can see that. But I'm not sure he understands how much damage was done." "What kind of damage?" Thomas hesitated, then began signing slowly. "After Sarah died, Richard shut everyone out, including me. I tried to help, tried to be there for him, but he just disappeared into work. Victoria encouraged it, said he needed space to grieve. But grief shared is grief halved. Grief alone becomes poison." Danny was absorbing this when she noticed they had an audience. Victoria stood across the room, watching their conversation with laser focus. Even from a distance, Danny could feel the woman's disapproval. "Excuse me." Both Danny and Thomas turned. A sharply dressed woman in her 50s stood behind them, smiling with the kind of warmth that never reached her eyes. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help noticing your conversation." She looked pointedly at their hands. "I'm Dr. Margaret Hartwell, and I work extensively with the deaf community." Danny felt a chill of warning. "I was just commenting to my colleague," Dr. Hartwell continued, "how impressive your sign language skills are. Very fluent, almost professional level." "Thank you," Danny said carefully. "Where did you study? Most people don't achieve that level of proficiency without formal training." The question felt like a trap. Around them, other guests had started to notice the conversation. Danny saw Victoria moving closer, her expression predatory. "I learned from my brother. He's been deaf since birth." "Fascinating." Dr. Hartwell's smile grew sharper. "And you learned entirely through family interaction? No classes, no formal instruction?" "That's right." "How wonderful. Though I have to say, some of the signs you're using are quite advanced. Regional variations that are typically only taught in specialized programs." Danny's heart started racing. She had taken classes, 2 semesters at community college years ago when Marcus was young, but admitting that now would make it look like she'd been planning this encounter. "What's happening?" Thomas signed, picking up on the tension. Before Danny could respond, Victoria appeared beside Dr. Hartwell. "Problem here?" Victoria asked sweetly. "Oh, no problem at all," Dr. Hartwell said. "I was just admiring Ms. Carter's remarkably sophisticated signing skills, almost like she's had professional training." Victoria's eyes glittered. "Really? How interesting. Richard told me you learned everything from your brother. Informal, family-style learning." The trap was closing. Danny could see it happening, could feel the walls moving in, but she couldn't figure out how to escape. She started. "Actually," came a voice from behind them, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Richard appeared, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Danny thought he was going to defend her. Instead, he looked at her with something cold in his eyes. Disappointment. Suspicion. "Dr. Hartwell, I appreciate your expertise. Victoria, could I see you in private?" As they walked away, Dr. Hartwell gave Danny one final smile. "Lovely meeting you, dear. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening." Thomas caught Danny's attention. "What just happened?" "I think I just got set up," she signed back. And as she watched Victoria whisper urgently in Richard's ear while he nodded grimly, Danny realized the test had been rigged from the beginning. Ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Danny's about to learn the hard way that rich people play by different rules. Subscribe before you find yourself unprepared for life's cruelest lessons. Not subscribing? Drop a comment. Tell us why you'd rather stay in the dark. The real question wasn't whether she'd pass Richard's test. The question was whether she'd survive Victoria's trap. The rest of the gala passed like a fever dream. Danny tried to focus on her job, helping guests, making connections, being the authentic person Richard claimed he wanted. But she could feel eyes on her constantly, judging, analyzing, waiting for her to slip up. Victoria had positioned herself strategically throughout the evening, always within earshot, always watching. And wherever Victoria went, doubt seemed to follow. Danny overheard fragments of conversation, wondered how she learned to sign so well. Awfully convenient timing. Richard's always been too trusting. By 10 p.m., the whispers had gotten so loud that even Thomas noticed. "People are talking about you," he signed during a quiet moment. "I know. What Victoria said earlier about your signing skills being too advanced, was that true?" Danny felt like she was being torn apart. She could lie to Thomas, but he was the one person here who deserved honesty. "I took some classes years ago. When Marcus was little, I wanted to make sure I could communicate with him properly." Thomas studied her face. "Why didn't you mention that before?" "Because I knew how it would look, like I planned all this." "Did you?" The question hit like a physical blow. Even Thomas, kind, lonely Thomas, was starting to doubt her. "No. I had never heard of your family before that night in the diner. I swear to you." Thomas nodded slowly, but she could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Victoria's poison was working. Across the room, Richard was deep in conversation with a group of investors, but every few minutes his gaze would find her, and each time his expression grew a little colder. Danny excused herself and escaped to the ladies' room, desperate for a moment to breathe. She was touching up her lipstick when Victoria entered. "Rough night?" Victoria asked, checking her own reflection with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. "It's been interesting, I'm sure." Victoria moved closer, her voice dropping to a conversational whisper. "Can I give you some advice? Woman to woman." Danny remained silent. Richard wants to believe in fairy tales. Dead wife, estranged uncle, lonely billionaire, searching for authentic human connection. It's very romantic. Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "But fairy tales don't exist in the real world." "What's your point?" "My point is that Richard will figure out what you are eventually. An opportunist who saw a chance and took it. Nothing wrong with that. I actually respect the hustle. But when he realizes the truth, he's going to feel very, very stupid." Victoria moved to leave, then paused at the door. And Richard hates feeling stupid more than anything else in the world. Alone in the bathroom, Danny gripped the marble countertop until her knuckles turned white. Victoria was right about one thing. Richard was starting to turn against her. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he'd stopped defending her. When she returned to the party, things had gotten worse. Dr. Hartwell was holding court near the bar, regaling a small group with her expert analysis of Danny's signing skills. The story had grown in the telling. Now Danny was apparently using graduate-level techniques and specialized regional dialects. "It just seems so coincidental," Dr. Hartwell was saying. A waitress with advanced ASL training happening to work at the exact restaurant where Mr. Lawson was meeting his deaf uncle. "What are the odds?" Richard stood at the edge of the group, his face carved from stone. Danny tried to approach him, but Victoria intercepted her smoothly. "Richard's taking some air on the balcony," Victoria said. "He asked not to be disturbed." Through the glass doors, Danny could see him standing alone, staring out at the city lights. His posture screamed isolation and betrayal. "He looks heartbroken," Thomas signed, appearing beside her. Victoria set me up. "All of this, Dr. Hartwell, the questions about my training, it was planned." Why would she do that? Because she can't afford for Richard to trust anyone else, especially not someone who might help him reconnect with you. Thomas studied Victoria across the room. She's been whispering poison in his ear for years. After Sarah died, Victoria was the only one he'd listened to. She convinced him that everyone else was either trying to take advantage of him or couldn't understand his grief, including you, especially me. Victoria told him I was trying to manipulate him through his guilt, that my attempts to help were really attempts to gain influence in the company. The pieces were falling into place. Victoria hadn't just isolated Richard from Thomas, she'd isolated him from everyone, made him dependent on her voice, her judgment, her version of reality. And now she was doing the same thing with Danny. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's voice cut through the party chatter. He'd returned from the balcony and was standing near the podium, his face a mask of cold professionalism. The room quieted. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. This event was meant to celebrate reconnection, authenticity, and the power of human kindness." His eyes found Danny's across the room. "Unfortunately, it seems that authenticity is harder to find than I hoped." Danny felt the blood drain from her face. "Sometimes," Richard continued, "people tell us what we want to hear because they know we're desperate to believe it. Sometimes, what looks like kindness is really just very good acting." The room was dead silent now. Every eye was on Richard, but Danny could feel the judgment radiating toward her. "I've learned a valuable lesson tonight about the difference between genuine compassion and calculated manipulation. I want to thank Dr. Hartwell for her insights, and I want to apologize to everyone here for the confusion." Thomas stepped forward, his face flushed with anger, but Victoria was already moving. "I think it's time for some guests to leave," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. before this becomes more embarrassing than it already is. Security appeared as if by magic, not threatening, but clearly present. Danny looked at Richard one last time, hoping to see some trace of the vulnerable man from the coffee shop, but he'd retreated completely behind his billionaire armor. "The car will take you home," he said formally. "The remaining balance of your payment will be transferred as agreed." It was a dismissal, clean, professional, and devastating. As security escorted her to the elevator, Danny caught Thomas's eye. He looked heartbroken, not just for her, but for Richard. "I'm sorry," he signed. The elevator doors closed on the wreckage of her hopes, and Danny realized she'd just learned the most expensive lesson of her life. In the world of the ultra-wealthy, kindness was a luxury they couldn't afford to believe in. And Victoria had just made sure Richard never would again. The warehouse meeting never happened. At 6 p.m. Tuesday, 2 hours before she was supposed to meet Richard, Danny's world exploded. She was making dinner for Marcus when the first news alert hit her phone. Breaking: Lawson Tech waitress linked to insurance fraud investigation. Her hands started shaking before she even clicked the link. The article was devastating. According to anonymous sources, Danny had allegedly been involved in a scheme to inflate Marcus's medical expenses, working with corrupt doctors to justify unnecessary procedures. The story painted her as a master manipulator who'd spent months setting up the Lawson family, using her brother's disability as a weapon to extract sympathy and money. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that they'd dragged Marcus into it. Photos of him leaving school, grainy surveillance footage of his doctor's appointments, even his medical records, somehow leaked despite privacy laws. The article questioned whether his hearing loss was as severe as claimed, suggesting the whole family was running a long-term con. "Marcus!" Danny called, her voice breaking. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, took one look at her face, and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. What happened? She showed him the article, watched his face crumble as he read about himself being described as a prop in an elaborate fraud scheme. "They're saying I'm faking." His hands moved slowly, like he was in shock. "That we're criminals." "It's all lies, Marcus, every single word." But even as she said it, her phone was buzzing with more notifications. The story was spreading like wildfire across social media. Lawson's scam was trending. The same people who'd called her a hero 3 days ago were now calling for her arrest. The comments were vicious, disgusting, using a disabled kid to scam money from grieving billionaires. "I knew something was fishy about her sob story. Hope they both go to prison." Marcus was reading over her shoulder, and she watched him shrink into himself with each cruel word. "Maybe I should have just stayed deaf," he signed, tears streaming down his face. "Don't you dare say that!" Danny grabbed his hands. "Don't you dare let them make you feel ashamed of who you are." But the damage was spreading faster than she could contain it. Her phone rang. Their landlord. "Ms. Carter, I'm getting calls from reporters. They're asking about you and your brother, whether you've been running scams from my property. I can't have this kind of attention." "Mr. Hartley, please, we've never done anything wrong." "I'm sorry, but I need you out by the end of the week. I'll return your deposit, but I can't risk my other tenants being harassed." He hung up before she could respond. 20 minutes later, another call. Marcus's school. "Ms. Carter, this is Principal Matthews. I'm afraid we're going to have to ask Marcus to stay home for the rest of the week while we assess the situation." "What situation? He's done nothing wrong." "There have been some concerns raised about the medical documentation for his accommodations. We need time to verify everything is legitimate. Your reputation can be destroyed in minutes by people with power and money. Think you're safe? Think again. Subscribe now, because knowledge is your only protection against predators like Victoria. Still not convinced? Comment why you'd gamble with your future." By evening, they'd lost their home. Marcus had been suspended from school, and 3 different news vans were parked outside their apartment building. Danny peered through the blinds at the reporters setting up cameras. "We can't stay here," she told Marcus. "Pack whatever you can carry." Where will we go? She had no idea. Their savings were gone, frozen by the bank pending the fraud investigation. Her job was gone. Her reputation was destroyed. And now they were homeless. But as they stuffed clothes into backpacks, Danny's phone rang one more time. "It's Thomas," the familiar voice said. "I've been watching the news. This is Victoria's work." "I figured that out," Danny said bitterly. "She's very thorough. Too thorough. She's made a mistake, and I think I know what it is. But first, you and Marcus need somewhere safe to stay. We can't afford— I have a cabin about an hour outside the city, completely private. You can stay there while we figure out how to fight this." Danny hesitated. Could she trust Thomas? Or was this just another trap? "Why would you help us?" "Because what happened to you at that gala, that was real. Your kindness to me was real, and I'll be damned if I let Victoria destroy something genuine just to protect her own secrets." An hour later, Danny and Marcus were driving through the Georgia countryside in Thomas's borrowed car, their entire life reduced to 2 backpacks and a handful of hope. The cabin was small but comfortable, tucked away in a forest that seemed to exist outside the reach of social media and cable news. For the first time in days, Marcus looked peaceful. "It's quiet here," he signed. "Good quiet or bad quiet?" "Good quiet." Like the world stopped screaming for a while. That night, as Marcus slept in the guest room, Danny sat on the cabin's small porch and tried to process what had happened to her life. A week ago, she'd been nobody special, just a waitress trying to help her brother. Now she was a fugitive from public opinion, hiding in the woods like some kind of criminal. Her phone buzzed, a text from Richard. "I know where you are. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the old mill by the creek. Come alone." She stared at the message for a long time. Every instinct told her this was dangerous. But she was out of options, and Thomas seemed to trust his nephew despite everything. Maybe it was time to find out what Richard knew about Victoria's mistake. Maybe it was time to stop running and start fighting back. But first, she needed to know exactly what she was fighting against. The old mill looked like something from a horror movie. Danny arrived early, partly from nerves, and partly because she wanted to scope out escape routes if this turned into another trap. The building had been abandoned for decades, its wooden wheel frozen above a creek that gurgled softly in the morning silence. Richard was already there, sitting on a fallen log, looking nothing like the polished CEO she'd met at the gala. His hair was disheveled, his clothes rumpled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming," he said without looking up. "Thomas said you know something about Victoria's mistake." Richard finally met her eyes, and what she saw there surprised her. Guilt. Genuine, bone-deep guilt. "I need to start with an apology. What Victoria did to you, the way she destroyed your life, I could have prevented it, should have prevented it. But you didn't. No, because I was a coward. I've been a coward for 5 years, ever since—" He trailed off. "Since Sarah died." Richard flinched like she'd slapped him. "Yes, since my wife died. Since I decided it was easier to trust no one than to risk being hurt again." Danny sat down on a rock across from him, maintaining distance but willing to listen. "Victoria convinced me you were dangerous, that you'd researched our family, targeted Thomas specifically. She showed me evidence, the same fake computer searches she used to get you fired. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her. It was easier than admitting that a stranger had shown my family more genuine kindness in 30 minutes than I'd managed in 5 years. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. Thomas doesn't know I'm here," Richard continued. "He thinks I'm still convinced you're a threat. But after what Victoria did with those news stories, I started asking questions." "What kind of questions?" Richard pulled out his phone and showed her a series of screenshots, bank records, email logs, phone calls. "Victoria's been very busy since the gala, paying off reporters, hiring private investigators, even bribing hospital administrators to leak Marcus's medical records." Danny's anger flared. "That's illegal." "Very illegal. But Victoria has resources, and she's never been caught breaking rules before." "Before? You mean she's done this to other people?" Richard's expression darkened. "Victoria sees threats everywhere. Over the years, she's destroyed several people she perceived as dangers to the family business. A journalist who got too close to a story, a former employee who asked uncomfortable questions, a competitor who was gaining market share. How? The same way she went after you. Character assassination, manufactured evidence, social media campaigns. She's very good at making innocent people look guilty. Danny felt sick. How many people? At least 6 that I know of, maybe more. Richard looked ashamed. I told myself it was just business, that she was protecting the company. But watching what she did to you. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. There's something else, he said finally. Something bigger. Thomas has been doing his own investigation into Victoria's activities, and what he found, it changes everything. What did he find? Richard hesitated, like he was about to cross a line he could never uncross. Evidence that Victoria has been embezzling from the company for years, millions of dollars funneled through fake charity programs and shell corporations. The revelation hit Danny like a physical blow. Holy shit. It gets worse. The money she's stolen, some of it was supposed to go to legitimate accessibility programs that could have helped people like Marcus. Rage built in Danny's chest. Victoria hadn't just destroyed her life. She'd been stealing money meant to help disabled people, while simultaneously ruining anyone who got too close to the truth. Why are you telling me this? Because Thomas wants to expose her, but he needs help. He's too close to the family, too emotionally invested. And Richard's voice cracked. I can't be trusted to do the right thing. I've proven that. What kind of help? Victoria's been careful, but she made one crucial mistake. She's been using company resources to destroy you. Servers, IT staff, even legal funds. There's a digital trail, but it requires someone on the inside to access it. Someone like you. Someone like me. But I can't do it alone. I need Thomas to trust me again, and right now he doesn't. He thinks I'm still under Victoria's influence. Danny studied Richard's face, looking for signs of deception, but all she saw was a broken man trying to find his way back to his humanity. What do you want from me? Help me prove to Thomas that I've changed. Help me get the evidence we need to expose Victoria. And in return... In return? I'll make sure you and Marcus are protected. New identities if necessary. Enough money to start over anywhere you want. And I'll personally ensure that Victoria pays for what she's done to you. It sounded too good to be true, which in Danny's experience usually meant it was. How do I know this isn't just another setup, another test? Richard stood up and walked to the creek's edge. You don't. You'll have to trust me. Trust the man who let his cousin destroy my life. Trust the man who's finally ready to do what's right. Danny watched the water flow over the ancient stones, carrying away the debris of years past. She thought about Marcus, hiding in a cabin because his own school wouldn't let him attend classes, about all the other people Victoria had destroyed, about the money stolen from programs that could have helped disabled children. What's the plan? Richard turned back to her, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time since she'd arrived. Thomas has been documenting everything, but he needs access to Victoria's private server. That requires someone with CEO-level clearance to authorize the breach. Which would be you. Which would be me. But Victoria's been watching me closely since the gala. If I suddenly start accessing sensitive files, she'll know something's up. So we need a distraction. We need you to come back. Publicly. Force Victoria to focus on destroying you again while Thomas and I gather the evidence. Danny laughed bitterly. You want me to paint a target on my back. Again. I want you to help us catch the woman who's been destroying innocent people for years, starting with you. The plan was insane. Dangerous. It would put both her and Marcus at even greater risk. But as Danny thought about Victoria's smug smile at the gala, about the reporters camping outside their apartment, about Marcus crying as he read the lies about himself online, she felt something she hadn't felt in days, the desire to fight back. If we do this, she said slowly, I want guarantees, written contracts, legal protection for Marcus no matter what happens to me. Done. And when it's over, when Victoria's in prison, I want a public apology. From you, from the company, from everyone who participated in destroying my reputation. Done. And one more thing. Anything. Danny looked Richard directly in the eyes. I want you to personally fund accessibility programs for deaf children, real ones, not fake charities. Use Victoria's stolen money to actually help people like my brother. Richard extended his hand. Deal. As they shook hands by the old mill, Danny felt like she was either making the smartest decision of her life or the stupidest. But either way, Victoria Lawson was about to learn that some people don't stay down when you knock them over. Some people get back up and fight. Thomas's evidence was worse than Danny had imagined. They met at the cabin that evening, Richard, Thomas and Danny, with Marcus safely asleep in the back room. The dining table was covered with printouts, financial records, and Thomas's methodical notes. I've been tracking Victoria's activities for 3 years, Thomas said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Ever since I started suspecting she was behind the problems that drove me away from the company. What problems? Danny asked. Thomas and Richard exchanged a look that made her stomach clench. Tell her, Richard said quietly. Thomas pulled out a thick folder. 5 years ago, Lawson Tech developed a communication system for vehicles. Emergency response, navigation, real-time traffic updates. Victoria was in charge of quality control. He opened the folder to reveal crash reports, police investigations, insurance claims. The system had a critical flaw. A bug in the emergency response protocol that could cause complete communication blackouts during accidents. Victoria knew about it. Danny's blood ran cold. Sarah. Richard's face crumpled. My wife was driving home from her book club on December 3rd, 2018. It was raining, visibility was poor. Her car went off the road and hit a tree. The communication system failed, Thomas continued, his voice clinical, but his hands shaking. She tried to call 911, tried to activate the emergency beacon. Nothing worked. She was trapped in that car for 6 hours before someone found her. Oh, God, Danny whispered. She might have survived if help had arrived immediately, Richard said, tears streaming down his face. But by the time they got her out, the silence that followed was deafening. Victoria covered it up, Thomas said. She buried the bug reports, paid off the investigators, and pushed through a recall that was too little, too late. 17 other people died in similar accidents before the system was finally fixed. Danny felt like she was going to be sick. She's not just a thief, she's a killer. Multiple killer, Thomas corrected. And she let Richard believe it was just a tragic accident. Let him blame himself for not driving Sarah home that night. Richard was sobbing now, years of guilt and grief pouring out of him. I should have known, I should have investigated, but I was so broken, and Victoria was so helpful, so supportive. She handled all the arrangements, dealt with the insurance companies, made all the problems disappear. Because she was covering her own tracks, Thomas said grimly. Danny stared at the evidence spread across the table. Financial records showing money stolen from safety programs, email chains discussing the cover-up, insurance payouts to families who would never know their loved ones died because of corporate negligence. This is enough to put her away for life, she said. If we can prove it, Thomas replied. But Victoria's been very careful. She's used intermediaries, shell companies, encrypted communications. A good lawyer could create enough doubt to get her acquitted. So what do we do? Richard wiped his eyes and looked up at her with something she'd never seen before. Determination. We get her to confess. How? By making her think she's won. By convincing her that she's successfully destroyed you and that there's no threat left. Thomas pulled out another folder, this one filled with surveillance photos. Victoria meeting with reporters, talking to hospital administrators, exchanging envelopes of cash with private investigators. She's gotten sloppy since the gala, Thomas said. Overconfident. If we can get her to admit what she's done on record. You want to wire me, Danny realized. It's the only way, Richard said. You confront her, make her think you've figured everything out. Push her until she breaks and tells you the truth. And if she doesn't break? If she just has me killed instead? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. She won't kill you, Thomas said. But he didn't sound entirely convinced. Too risky, too public after everything that's happened. But she might try to have you arrested, Richard added, or committed, or simply disappear you in a way that looks accidental. Danny thought about Marcus sleeping in the next room, about the life they'd built together, about how much she had to lose. Then she thought about Sarah, trapped in her car for 6 hours, dying alone while Victoria covered up the evidence that could have saved her. She thought about the 17 other people who'd died because Victoria chose profit over safety. She thought about all the future victims if Victoria was never stopped. "When do we do it?" she asked. "Tomorrow night," Richard said. "Victoria's hosting a board meeting at her penthouse. Private, secure, no witnesses, except us." "How do we get in?" "I'm still a board member," Richard said. "I can get us inside, but once we're there, I'm on my own." Thomas reached across the table and took her hand. "Not entirely alone. We'll be listening to every word. And the moment things go wrong, we call the police." "The police who've been bought off before." "The FBI," Richard corrected. "Thomas has been building a case with them for months. They're ready to move as soon as we give them enough evidence." Danny looked around the table at these two men who'd lost so much to Victoria's greed and manipulation. Richard had lost his wife and his humanity. Thomas had lost his family and his company. And she'd lost her reputation, her home, her brother's faith in the world's basic fairness. But tomorrow night, they might get the chance to take it all back. Evil wins when good people do nothing. Richard almost learned this too late. Don't be caught sleeping when corruption strikes your community. Subscribe now. Stay one step ahead of those who destroy innocence for profit. Refusing? Tell us in the comments why you'd rather be blindsided. "There's something else you need to know," Richard said quietly, "about Victoria's endgame." "What do you mean?" "This isn't just about protecting her secrets anymore. She's been positioning herself to take over the company completely. With Thomas discredited and me emotionally compromised, she's been convincing the board that new leadership is needed. She wants to be CEO. She wants to be everything: CEO, chairman of the board, sole decision-maker. And once she has that power," Thomas finished the thought, "she'll be untouchable. No matter what evidence we have, no matter what crimes she's committed, she'll have enough money and influence to make it all disappear." The weight of what they were attempting settled over Danny like a heavy blanket. They weren't just trying to expose a corrupt executive. They were trying to stop a killer from becoming one of the most powerful people in the country. "If we fail," she began. "If we fail," Richard said, "Victoria wins everything. The company, the power, the ability to destroy anyone who threatens her, and people like your brother, like all the disabled children who could benefit from real accessibility programs, will never get the help they need." Danny closed her eyes and thought about Marcus learning sign language as a child, about his determination to succeed despite a world that often ignored him. She thought about Sarah dying alone in her car. She thought about 17 other families who'd never gotten justice. When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. "Tell me exactly what I need to say." It's no longer about clearing her name. It's about avenging the 18 people Victoria murdered, including Richard's own wife. They have a plan to get her confession, but they are about to walk into the penthouse of a killer who is more powerful and dangerous than they can possibly imagine. Do you think they can expose her, or is Victoria one step ahead? Let me know your prediction in the comments below. And remember how I said you were going to need a scale at the beginning. Don't forget to rate part 1 of this story from 1 to 10. Subscribe and turn on all notifications because you do not want to miss the trap being set in part 2.